Well, hello, everybody. Welcome once again. It is time for Syracuse basketball postgame presented by Krause Health. Brent Axe, Mike Curtis with you. And sadly, this will be our last show of the season as Syracuse has been eliminated from the NCAA tournament. Houston will move on to take on the 12-seed Oregon State in the Elite Eight on Monday night. Final score from Indy, Houston 62, Syracuse 46. That is the lowest point total Syracuse has ever scored in an NCAA tournament. Prior to that, it was 51 points in a win over Princeton. But that was the story of this one. Houston did a masterful defensive job on Syracuse, particularly on Buddy Boeheim. Dejan Giroux was a question mark all week long. He had the hip injury, and weren't quite sure if he was going to play in this one and how he would play in this one. But, Mike, I'll bring you in because you just came out of the Houston locker room. Not only did Giroux play, he did a masterclass on defending Boeheim, and this was just a great defensive performance all around by the Cougars on the Orange. What did they have to say about this one?
Yeah, just got out of the Houston post-game Zoom, and Dejan Giroux was the first player up at the podium, and he pretty much said the game plan, especially on Buddy Boeheim, was to run him off the three-point line, chase him nonstop, try to prevent him from getting the ball. And they did that. They only limited him to 12 points, 1 for 9 shooting from beyond the three, and they really took him out of the game. Giroux also said like the game plan offensively was to get the ball right in the middle of that zone and have whoever caught it right there in the middle of the paint make a decision. They were either gonna pass out of it or take that mid-range jumper, and they took a lot of those mid-range jumpers and they knocked them down.
They really did. They hit enough threes in this game. Grimes with some key threes down the stretch. Look, Houston's a terrific rebounding team. I think Syracuse kept it pretty respectable throughout the game. Houston ended up winning the rebounding battle by 10. We'll go over some numbers here shortly. And Syracuse was close in this game at times. You know, towards the end of the first half, Jesse Edwards, who made such a huge difference in the first half of the game, was taken out in the last part of the first half, coming out of a timeout. Houston goes on a 10-0 run, recognizing he's not there. Mike, Jim Boeheim was asked about that in his press conference, and let's just say back to Snarky Jim, kind of brushed off the question from the reporter and did note that Jesse was tired at the end of the half. Okay, I mean, he looked pretty fine to me. He was playing okay, and this is the NCAA tournament. Like, you got to gut it out in those situations, right? And then wasn't in the game down the stretch. Now, in that case, I kind of understand it, Mike, because I think you need Robert Braswell out there to hit some threes. He couldn't hit some threes. Kadari Richmond, Joe Girard, who should be in there at the end. Again, you know, you want free throw shooters, you want three-point shooters out there. The gamble didn't work. Houston just put the clamps down and won a pretty impressive game here. And, Mike, how about this stat? I don't know if it came up in the post-game press conference for Houston, but Houston could make a run to the Final Four and not have to play a single-digit seed. They would beat Cleveland State, a 15 seed, a 10 seed in Rutgers, an 11 seed in Syracuse. And if they beat Oregon State on Monday, that's a 12 seed, a full double-digit run for Houston if they can make it to the Final Four.
Talk about a run that that gives you a bit of luck going to the Final Four. That's incredible. That stat didn't come up in the post-game presser. But Kelvin Sampson, he pretty much said that, hey, we play pretty good defense too. We know about the 2-3 zone and what they're known for, but we've done this pretty much all season. So that was pretty interesting. I think they played with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. I didn't get to ask them that question, but right before I was able to ask my question, that was going to be it, because all week long, you saw Buddy Boeheim getting the national attention, Syracuse getting the spotlight, and we really didn't hear much about Houston. So it definitely looked like they took that personally and played with a chip on their shoulder, and they pretty much clamped down from the opening tip.
They did, Mike, and that's a terrific point you bring up. I brought it up on my radio show throughout the week because every time you turned on the television, a podcast, Twitter, radio, local and national, you saw or heard Jim or Buddy Boeheim. And good for them. Look, it's a great story, the father-son thing, and it's ironic because Kelvin Sampson's son is on the coaching staff, and you didn't hear a word about that. all week, but that's it. You didn't hear a thing from Houston. They're the 2 seed. They're a 26-3 team, pretty darn good team. I think Calvin Sampson did like 2 national interviews the whole week. So the Jim and Buddy show was great. It was entertaining. It was a great story, but I definitely agree with you. I think Houston did play with a bit of a chip on their shoulder in that sense. So before we respond to some of your comments, recap the season in addition to this game and start to peek ahead to next year, because one thing that Coach brought up in the postgame press conference, Mike, is this is going to be it's already becoming an insane transfer portal in college basketball. And Jim Boeheim, well, not naming any names, said that Syracuse won't be immune to that. He's flat out said players are going to leave this team, so you got to wonder who that could be. But let's look at some stats from this one first. Syracuse, as we mentioned, what a masterful defensive job by Houston. The Orange shoot 14 of 50 in this game. That's 28%, just 5 of 23 from three-point range. 13 of 17, 76% from the free throw line. Mike, I was wondering about the officiating in this game. It was interesting, to say the least, but Syracuse actually benefited from it more than Houston did. They got a ton of calls in the second half, just couldn't quite take full advantage of it.
Yeah, I know one specifically. I think it was when Marek Dolezaj drove to the lane. He looked like he got just hacked by 2 Houston defenders, and there was no call. And then immediately on the next play down, Houston gets a layup. And I thought that was a pretty big sequence.
It was. Syracuse did get a lot of calls to go their way before that. They were in the bonus, I think, for the last 9 minutes of the game. I thought it would be a tightly called game because Houston kind of has this reputation of being a physical defensive team. And, yeah, Syracuse, 13 of 17 at the free throw line. Houston only got to the free throw line 14 times, and they hit 9 of those. On the rebounding front, now Houston ended up winning 40-31 overall. But that's a win for Syracuse in a sense because Houston is just one of the best rebounding teams in the country, particularly on the offensive end. In this game, they had 11 offensive rebounds, 29 defensive rebounds. Syracuse was close. Houston just kind of padded that as the game went along. Leading scorer for Houston was their leading scorer throughout the year, Quentin Grimes. He had 14 points, 4 3-pointers on the day. We mentioned a couple of key threes for him. Marcus Sasser with 12 points. He had a couple early threes, Mike, and this is a guy that had struggled down the stretch for Houston. He was pretty cold from the three-point line, but hit a couple early on. And that was a big difference in this game versus San Diego State and West Virginia. Both of those teams really struggled out of the gate and had to recover. Houston, while this wasn't a high-scoring game at first, they looked comfortable, and that defense really helped them settle in the first half against Syracuse. They never really fell into that zone trap.
Yeah, you could tell Syracuse offensively just didn't have it. From the opening tip. Alan Griffin came out and took a really bad three-pointer. It was an air ball, and he got yanked pretty quickly. And Robert Braswell was subbed in. Jim Boeheim didn't like that shot at all. And I don't think Alan Griffin kind of recovered from it. And he hasn't had the best postseason at all. It's very, very interesting. And I think if he would have had somewhat of a regular game, they probably would have had a better chance.
Yeah, Boeheim said after the game, Mike, that he needed Griffin and Guerrier to be big scorers in this game. They didn't come through. You mentioned Griffin got pulled within 1 minute of game time. Now, down the stretch, a lot of that had to do with defensive lapses because Robert Braswell was playing so well. Jim had kind of the quick hook on Griffin there. This time, as you mentioned, a bad three-pointer. An air ball. He scored 8 points in Syracuse's last 4 games, many of those postseason games, as you mentioned. Just 2 points in this game, 0 for 3 shooting. He just fell off a cliff. He was terrific at times throughout. I thought he could really be the guy to star for Syracuse in this postseason, and ended up being Buddy Boeheim up until today. But you got to wonder if he's somebody who's going to think about transferring or what his role was down the stretch. Quincy Guerrier had 8 points in this one. Joe Girard and Buddy Boeheim both end up with 12 points on the day. Joe was 2 of 5 from three-point range. We mentioned the masterful job by Giroux on Boeheim. He goes 3 of 13 overall, 1 of 9 from three-point range. Kadari Richmond with 5 points. on the day. He made some plays in this game, wasn't on the floor down the stretch, and when Syracuse was pressing and maybe when they needed a physical guard out there to challenge Houston a little bit. I thought that was a little surprising. Braswell didn't have his best game. He's been terrific down the stretch for Syracuse, but just didn't really have it today. And Mike, we brought up Jesse Edwards. He ends up with 5 points, 6 rebounds, on the day, 2 block shots. I mean, he was terrific. And I think that's one thing that's going to linger into the offseason about why he wasn't on the floor. Jim said he was tired down the stretch of the first half. And at times in the second half, even understanding that you needed Braswell to hit threes, Jesse creates offense with his defense and wasn't in foul trouble or anything. So I think that's one that Boeheim's going to regret there. I think he should have been out there.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I think Jesse Edwards was the lone bright spot in this game. And it could be very good for Syracuse going forward if he's able to kind of take his game up a notch during this offseason. The way he's able to defend, the way he's able to deflect shots, impact shots, he doesn't even have to block them. All he has to do is reach his hand out, stretch his arms out, and he's making a big impact right there in the middle of that zone. And just his offensive rebounding. I mean, he gives you second chance opportunities, and that's what Syracuse needs because they're not a very good rebounding team.
He's such a disruptor in the paint, and it really affected Houston. They couldn't they had a couple guys open. I was watching on 3 straight possessions down the stretch of the first half, and Giroux or Grimes or anybody that was carrying the ball couldn't even see him because Jesse was just such a disruptor in the paint there. He had a nice a flash to the basket. He's showing off his offensive moves. I know they're going to want to put on some weight here in the offseason, maybe 15, 20 pounds. Maybe the Marek Dolzhai eat pizza plan. I don't know, but they need him to put on some weight here in the offseason. You mentioned it on Twitter during the game, Mike. Look, when Kadari Richmond really develops a jump shot, he's going to be a problem for teams. He's going to be a matchup nightmare. And now if he develops his shot and you get Buddy continuing on this run next year, you got 2 6'6" players that can shoot. That's going to be a big, big advantage for Syracuse in that backcourt.
Yeah, Kadari, we've said it all season long. He's a game changer when he's out there on the floor. The way he's able to facilitate and the way he's able to defend. So if he can add that extra layer to his game, that 3-point shot or even a mid-range shot, I think that elevates his game even more, and he could probably compete for that starting spot next year. Not sure how Gerard will step his game up next year. It'll be interesting to see how he does. But I'm definitely looking forward to how this team looks next season. And who knows, we might have another Boeheim on the court.
Could be. Jimmy needs a place to play. The Ivy League won't even let him play games at Cornell.
Yeah, Jim Boeheim is not a big fan of the Ivy League and their decision.
He said that again in his post-game press conference tonight. So, yeah, the transfer portal, it's already crazy. There's a lot of big-name players, starting players leaving. They see an opportunity. It's kind of a mix of the extra COVID year, the opportunity to go somewhere and play right away, and just kind of having the leverage, knowing that, if you're not getting what you want in terms of playing time or whatever else the case may be at your current school, you can go in that portal, and if you're a good player, chances are Syracuse is going to pick you up. Mike, you cover the women's team, of course, as well, and just on Friday alone, Emily Angsler, 6th person of the year in the ACC, terrific player for the Orange, who would have had a huge role next year. She goes in the portal, and then late Friday night, Syracuse picks up a transfer who was a 41% three-point shooter from USC, if I'm correct, right?
Alexis Aaron. Yeah, she's. I think she gives the Orange another 3-point threat, and it's definitely interesting to see that Emily left. Considering the performance that she had all season. But I will note that she didn't play first 2 games of the season, and we never found out why.
Yeah. But it just goes to show you can win some and lose some in the same day. So it is going to be a crazy offseason, to say the least. All right, let's jump in. Hey, really appreciate everybody being with us tonight. If you're here on the East Coast with us as we speak, it just past 1 o'clock in the morning. Appreciate you staying up late. Either way, even if you're on the West Coast, it's 10 o'clock, right? It's getting late out there. So thanks for being with us here live, and thanks for being with us throughout the season. Let's see what you said about this one, though. Richard said it was a good ride. Doug saying you won't win playing like that. Boeheim needs to implement a totally new offense. Brian, a little frustrated, saying JB got more out of this team by getting in and getting 2 than I could have dreamed after Georgia Tech. And Mike, I got to tell you, we were here on this show after that Georgia Tech game. Full disclosure, I sat here and laughed at Josh Pastner and said, because Josh Pastner at that post-game press conference said that there's no doubt that Syracuse was an NCAA tournament team. He wanted 11 ACC tournament teams in, and we kind of laughed at him. Like, how can you say that about Syracuse? But they proved it. They won down the stretch. They beat North Carolina. They beat Clemson, almost beat Virginia after taking out NC State in the ACC tournament. They earned their way in. And Syracuse is literally the best double-digit team in NCAA tournament history at this point. That's not my opinion. That goes by their record as a double-digit seed. You put Syracuse in, they're going to make it worth your while. And getting to the Sweet 16, if I had told you that, if I come on this show after Syracuse had lost to Georgia Tech and said, Mike, I think this is a Sweet 16 team, you would have kicked me off. You would have shut this thing down and said, get out of here. You're crazy. But that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, I would have asked what you were on for sure. But no, I totally agree. And I think I said on the last show that I didn't think that Syracuse was going to make it past either the first or the second round. And they made it all the way to the Sweet 16. That just shows you that the zone does work to an extent, it especially when teams have limited time to prepare for it. When you have those days, one day in between games, it's kind of hard to prepare for it, but when you have a whole week to study it, you can see that makes a lot of difference.
It just goes to show you too that you've got to hit the shots that you get against the zone. San Diego State had a ton of open looks in that first game of the tournament. They weren't falling, and you fall right into the quicksand, if you will, if you're missing shots and you let Syracuse take control of this thing. Antonio says just didn't happen. Syracuse was only in the game when Edwards was in. Braswell, a non-factor in this one. Syracuse had no answer for Buddy not hitting shots. And, Buddy didn't hit shots in the first half of the West Virginia game either, Mike. Joe Girard did, and then Buddy went off in the second half. But clearly Houston did not make the same mistakes that West Virginia did. For some reason, West Virginia allowed Buddy to get some open shots in that second half. And I was wondering about this coming into the week, and Houston did it. And you saw it, Mike, not only Giroux, but their guards would push up, and Buddy relies so much on getting that open shot off the screen at the top. He wasn't getting that through the night. I think he had 2 clean looks the entire game, whereas for some reason in the West Virginia game, and I think that Bob Huggins regretted that after the game and noted it, that they gave Buddy too many open looks. But Houston said, if we're going to lose to this team, it is not going to be because of him. Someone else has to step up and beat us, and that did not happen.
Yeah, it's kind of simple. When you take out the guy who's been averaging almost 30 a game over the past few games, you're probably going to have a good shot at winning the game. So once you take out Buddy as a shooter, Syracuse has to rely on his other guys, Girard, Dolezaj. Dolezaj didn't play well at all. He got in foul trouble early and kind of never recovered from it. So
it's something that Kelvin Sampson has said. It's something his son, who's on the coaching staff, has said, Kellen Sampson, that really their mission state. I'm paraphrasing what he said, Mike. I watched a recent interview with him and Kellen Sampson now, and he said, listen, you're not going to beat us by getting in the paint. We'll double you. We'll get in your face. We'll do everything we can to keep you out of the paint. And he even said in that interview that we're willing to give up some contested threes in order to accomplish that mission. And coming into this game, I'm like, you sure about that with the way Buddy Boeheim is shooting? But obviously they went out and were terrific taking Buddy out of this one. Doug says never a plan to post up Quincy. That should be an option for this team. Dave notes, what makes the run Syracuse had the last month so impressive? They made that with 2 starters that were non-factors in this one. Tim saying not going to win many games, scoring 46 points. This loss is on the offense or their lack of it. I'm not really sure what else you could have done against Houston, to be honest with you. I mean, maybe with the foul trouble that you put Houston in, maybe attack the glass a little bit more, Kadari Richmond a little bit more, have Jesse in the game to try and facilitate some offense by creating turnovers on defense. So per Tim's point there, what else do you think Syracuse could have done offensively with Buddy shut down?
It's kind of difficult because they turned Guerrier into a 3-point shooter. He typically does a good job of attacking the basket. but that wasn't the case today. Robert Braswell wasn't making any of his shots. You can typically rely on him for at least 1 or 2 threes.
And he had a couple open looks.
Yeah, he had a lot of clean looks. So I don't know. Like when you take away the inside of the paint and you're not knocking down any of your 3-pointers, it's going to be hard to beat the team like this. Houston is a very good defensive team. They got a lot of athletic players over there that made it tough tonight.
Carolyn says, I'm proud of this team, period. Sometimes the other team is just better, and she puts a little emoji in there as well. Adam says, Kadari needed to be in there dishing to everyone. Marek could as well. I was wondering about Marek in this one, Mike, because that was kind of the secret sauce, right? Given what we said about Houston and how determined they are to keep people out of the paint. If you get Marek's face, watch that offense wilt, and that's exactly what happened. And you brought up that play where they didn't call the foul. On that play, he should have dunked the ball, or at least attempted to dunk the ball, and probably would have got the call. There was a play down the stretch where Quincy Guerrier, speaking of Quincy, got the ball under the basket, got his pocket, picked. Houston goes the other way, gets a 3-point play. That could have swung things the other way. There were a couple woulda, coulda, shoulda moments there down the stretch. But as you said, this offense just wasn't feeling it in any way, shape, or form. And maybe those plays would have made the score a little closer, but ultimately wouldn't put Syracuse over the top.
Yeah, it's interesting because when this team is clicking, pretty much everyone is spreading the wealth on offense. Even if it's just one person that goes completely off, like Boeheim has been the past few games. But when you only got 2 guys in double figures, Buddy and Gerard got the majority of his points kind of in garbage time, it was a tough shooting night. Quincy scored 8, so he was the 3rd leading scorer. But again, like when they're struggling on offense and you got a team as defensively sound as Houston, it's going to be a tough night.
So, Mike, now we go into this offseason here. We mentioned the transfer portal is going to be insane. Syracuse is going to lose some players. Jim Boeheim flat out said it.
Yeah.
So all we could do is speculate who those players could be. But I thought we could just go through it real quick here. I'm just going to go through the box score and the guys that got in, and we'll mention anybody that didn't. And just real quick, I say the name, and you tell me what you think for next year in terms of what kind of player they can be. You ready?
Let's go.
Here we go. Quincy Guerrier.
Better off the dribble. Definitely. He's going to improve off the dribble and be able to attack the basket probably at will.
If Alan Griffin comes back, that's a guy who I think has to learn the rotations of the zone better, find out what got him pulled so quickly from these last few games, improve on that. But, I mean, great spot-up shooter, maybe a little bit more in the paint. Just one more year comfortable. I would like to see Griffin come back on this team next year. I know he faltered down the stretch, but I think he could be really good for this team.
Yeah, one thing I like to see from Griffin more is when he attacks the basket, he's always looking to pass. He doesn't try to finish with a layup or try to even dunk on someone. He's always looking to pass if he's driving. Either that or he's taking the 3-point shot or he's taking the turnaround mid-range jumper. So I'd like to see him try to finish at the rim more.
I don't think we're going to see Marek Dolezaj back. He does have the option to return if he wants to with the COVID exemption, but I think he's got a pro career awaiting him somewhere overseas, and I think he's going to take that option. Joe Girard, I think, needs to work on his handle, cut back on the turnovers. You know, he's a player who can shoot, could get to the free throw line, but he's got to recognize his weaknesses and how he overcomes those, particularly if Kadari Richmond really evolves here as a player. And I guess we'll kind of combine Joe and Kadari and what we think their steps are next year going forward.
Yeah, I like to see Joe's shot selection get better. He does take a lot of errant 3-point shots, especially from deep. But sometimes he makes them. Like he made one today, and he made one early in the tournament. But I definitely like to see his shot selection get better.
I think Kadari's got the biggest upside on this team. If he develops a shot, which we're starting to see flashes of towards the end of the season, we know he can get in the paint. He's a terrific defender. If he gets bigger, which, you know, players naturally do in the offseason, like that's a first-team All-ACC player. If it's next year or the year after that, whenever it is, I am really excited about the potential of Kadari Richmond.
Yeah, you said it. I think his upside is the most too, and I think he's going to take a significant jump, especially if he works on his jump shot. If he just gets in the gym every day and works on that jump shot, off the dribble, catch and shoot, mid range, work on a floater. I'd like to see him get a floater too. I know typically he backs down his defender, especially if he has a size advantage, and tries to just lay it up. But I like to see him get a floater.
We mentioned Jesse Edwards. The big thing for him is he has to get bigger. Braswell, I think, is also making some leaps here. And you got to remember, this is a guy that's playing through a painful shin condition. His legs are constantly in pain when he's out there. They've never really figured out what the deal is with that. But I think there's a natural progression for him there. Maybe shot selection, although he does get open, to get a little bigger, a little more aggressive on the boards, kind of figure out what his role is. He did think about transferring last year. I wonder if he's a candidate to do it again this year. But if Braswell's back, I think he'll play a big role next year, Mike.
I agree. I saw someone just say, where does Benny Williams fit into things next year? That'll be interesting. I'm not sure where he fits as of right now, because Jim doesn't go deep into his bench. He typically goes 6, 7 guys, maybe even 8 if they're in foul trouble. But it'll be interesting to see how he fits on this team and who the Orange goes after in the transfer portal. What type of player do they need? I think they need another big for sure, but I also think they need another guy who can be a playmaker, who can handle the ball, get his teammates involved, and shoot.
They're going to have plenty of choices in that transfer portal the way it's going, that's for sure. So Benny is a 5-star talent. I think he's going to get on the floor one way or the other, and it kind of reminds me of a name that came in, maybe not as highly touted, but as a talent we didn't see at all. I think he had 1 3-pointer in the postseason here, Mike. Woody Newton. I mean, if you're going to pick a guy who's going to put his name in the portal, I would put money on that. Okay, and that's nothing against him. I mean, you got to do what's best for you. He's got some options elsewhere, but he just became a ghost down the stretch. Wasn't used at all. I would expect his name to go into the portal. I'd be very surprised if he wrote it out and came back next year. And then there were some guys on the bench we didn't see quite enough of this year, just kind of developing. John Bolajok, guys like that. What kind of role do they play? Are they just bench players, role players for next year? I don't know. I didn't really see enough of John Bull to really give you a thorough kind of evaluation of what he can do. I'll tell you what, he's a star off the court, Mike. Some of those videos they had from Indianapolis when they were going to the baseball field and doing some team bonding activities. That kid's a ham. He's a star on camera. So he's got that going for him. As a player, though, kind of incomplete, I guess, is the grade. We got to see what kind of role he plays next year.
Yeah, I was going to mention it. He's definitely got the personality off the court. I bet he's a tremendous interview. I saw he calls himself Big Stepper. So if he can turn that into his playing time, Big Stepper on the court, I think Syracuse would be in a good position next season.
So all told, Mike, Sweet 16 run, they made it through the season. All the COVID pauses that they had. Remember, they started the season with a COVID pause. Jim Boeheim had COVID. They can't practice. On one day's notice, they played Bryant and barely win that game. They had to make a huge comeback to beat Buffalo in overtime. That Alan Griffin chase down block was an amazing play. Northeastern was a close game. They lose to Pittsburgh twice. Down 20 to Notre Dame, had to come back and win that game. Down 16 to NC State, had to come back and win that game. We mentioned the games that they lost, got beat pretty good by Virginia, got beat by Duke in a game they were never in. And Duke, I think just hit 2 more 3-pointers in that game. And Duke never even ended up making the tournament, right? And they lose to Georgia Tech, and we're like, this is just not a tournament team. They prove us wrong. They make the turnaround. They make a run to the Sweet 16. So, yeah, there's some disappointments there. But, boy, if I'm sitting here telling you that they made the Sweet 16, they made it through a season, and there was a lot of fun moments along the way, particularly at the end of the season, I think everybody would take that, right? I think all told, this is a season that Syracuse fans will look back on fondly.
Yeah, they salvaged the season where they were pretty much on the bubble for the final couple of weeks of the season until the ACC tournament came. And they're like, well, not the ACC tournament, but those wins over North Carolina, over Clemson, it seemed like they turned the corner. So it's going to be interesting to see how they rebound from it, if they improve from it. I don't think you can decline. You can always decline, but I don't think this team declines. I think we'll see a much improved Syracuse team, especially as Kadari becomes a sophomore, as Joe becomes a junior. I often forget that Joe's still a sophomore, so he's still got a lot of upside, and Buddy's going to be a senior next year. So I think it'll be a good little team.
Well, Mike, I want to thank you for hopping on board this year. It was great to have somebody to bounce some stuff off of, and I love talking with the commenters and people that come on the show. But you were a welcome addition this year, and I really had a lot of fun with you. Maybe Mike and I will pop on here once in a while, do some different things during the off season. You never know what we'll come up with, but it was great to have you on board this year, my friend.
It was a joy to be here. Definitely enjoy talking hoops with anyone, especially someone as great as you, Brent. Like you're a pro in this, and I just try to learn from you from each show we do. And it's always fun to interact with the fans and our readers, and I just enjoyed it. It was a great time.
Kind words there, my friend. And that was certainly my next and biggest thanks to everybody that watched the show this year, hung with us, including on nights like this. It's 1 o'clock in the morning and you're sitting here talking basketball with us. You know, we really appreciate that. We really appreciate you coming by throughout the season. Thanks to our friends at Krause Health for sponsoring this, and, you know, everybody behind the scenes that helps us out with this. And it was a lot of fun. It was a heck of a ride. Who knew we'd be in the Sweet 16? But that's where it ends for Syracuse as Houston knocks them off 62-46. So once again, a big thank you to everybody for joining us throughout the season. It's going to be a wild off season. We'll be all over it. We'll be covering it for you. So stay tuned, my friends. A lot to come here in what could be a crazy offseason for college basketball, and we'll see how that affects Syracuse. But thanks for joining us throughout the season. You guys enjoy it. And I'll say this to end, Mike. Keep an eye on those lacrosse teams, folks. Could be a couple of national championships coming our way. So,
yeah, we still got some national sports to watch. So if you're a lacrosse fan, definitely look out for that. I'm pretty sure some more women's news will be breaking sometime soon, so keep an eye on that too.
Absolutely. Uncle Brent might have to fire up the show for lacrosse at the way they're going, both on the men's and women's side. Championships coming for those teams. I can smell it. Well, listen, thanks again, everybody. Enjoy it, and we will talk to you again on Syracuse football postgame in the fall. How about that? When football season rolls along again, we'll be right back here doing our thing. But thanks for joining us throughout the season, everybody.